For more on the life and times of Queen Elizabeth II, I'm joined by Roger Southall, a sociology professor at Wits University. Professor, thank you so much for your time this evening in the wake of the passing of Queen Elizabeth. I'd like to start off, did you watch the address by King Charles III just a moment ago on television?
Yes, I did. Yes, I did. Yeah.
Tell me what you made of that address by him.
Well, I think it was what we might have expected. I think that he said everything that he was going to say for a long time: respect for his mother, love for his mother, and that he will continue in her ways. And I think that's what we're all expecting. I don't think there are any great surprises in there. I think the mentions of the Commonwealth were abundant. And in terms of the, if you like, the soap opera of the monarchy, I think he made a reference to Harry and Meghan, which was warm and embracing, which, I think that's something which people will have been waiting for.
Absolutely. The King also making mention of the Queen's address on her 21st birthday here in Cape Town, where she promised to devote her whole life to the service of our great imperial family. That mention very much including South Africa. And South Africans often feel, that the monarchy in the UK is quite distant from us, but it isn't really. As a member of the Commonwealth and our long history with England and with Britain, what do you make of where we find ourselves now?
In relation to the Commonwealth, I think there has been a major move back diplomatically in terms of South Africa moving into the Commonwealth. I think that there was probably a strong undercurrent in South Africa at the time of South Africa leaving the Commonwealth under Verwoerd, which was very disappointed that this had happened. And I think overall the Commonwealth played a productive role in adding to pressures for change in this country. And I think it was a progressive move and much to be expected when after the transition that South Africa moved back into the Commonwealth. And I think given that, as you say, the long history from whenever you want to tame it, from 1910 onwards, of South Africa's close association with Britain through the two world wars, where South Africans made a major contribution to the struggle against fascism and the struggle for democracy, despite the opposition of the then National Party and many of its adherents. So I think it's completely appropriate that South Africa rejoin the Commonwealth.
Let's talk about the role that the Queen played over the past 70 years, specifically in relation to African countries. And during that time, we saw many of the African countries that had once been under British rule gain their independence. And throughout that process, the Queen had to make certain adjustments, both publicly and in her private view of her role within these countries. And some of the public shows, or let's say the ways in which she engaged with African leaders, speaks very strongly of her view of Britain and the dissolution of the empire. Talk to us about her role.
Well, I think in some ways she turned out to be certainly abreast of the politicians wanting decolonization, and if not a little bit personally ahead. If you remember when her visit to South Africa was made in 1947, General Smuts was still Prime Minister in South Africa. And it was only a year later that the National Party came in with its program of apartheid. And once the National Party came in, there was always a greater distance between South Africa and Britain. And subsequently, this widened once African countries started becoming independent. The crunch came, of course, during the 1980s, when there was the major movement diplomatically for pressure upon South Africa to move towards a transition. And by all accounts, although, of course, we will never know the details, the Queen was very much had a warm relationship with the key Commonwealth leaders, such as Julius Nyerere and Kenneth Kaunda, and had some disagreements with Margaret Thatcher, the then Prime Minister, who was really wanting to who saw the ANC as an enemy, as a communist, a member of the communist bloc and so forth. So as I say, I think in many ways that Queen Elizabeth in her personal relations with African leaders was often ahead of some of the British parliamentarians and British governments themselves.
You speak specifically of an occasion in 1961 when she danced with the Ghanaian president.
Yes, I mean, it may have been overblown a little bit, but I think that if you compare the social attitudes of the time, the fact that the Queen, and I hate to say this, the fact that the Queen danced with a black president raised some eyebrows in establishment quarters. I don't think we should put too much diplomatic and political weight on it, but I think it indicated that she had no problems with the changing social values which took place during her reign.
And it just shows you how far we have come. And you speak also about the relationship, the future relationship of King Charles and the reception that he may likely get from African governments. What do you foresee?
Well, I imagine there's going to be far much continuity than change. I think that King Charles is still a bit of a surprise to be calling him that. I think that King Charles will be in line with all the values of his mother. I think he has indicated his own. He's relatively advanced in some social attitudes, I think, in terms, and has been very important in terms of pressing an agenda of climate, of combating climate change. And I think that he is going to find a warm response amongst African leaders within the Commonwealth.
Where do you think we are in terms of open dialogue? Because sometimes diplomacy stifles criticism, and you know, no matter what one feels about the timing of the comments, the EFF has in the last 2 days raised some harsh criticism against the Queen and against, you know, the role of colonizers in general, and said that there has been no apology for the atrocities committed under colonialism. Do you think there's a need for more open dialogue?
I think there's always a need for more open dialogue, and I think the issue of memory about the empire in Britain and the recognition of numerous atrocities which were committed by British colonialism, the issue of memory is still highly controversial. I think it needs to be remembered in terms of direct criticism of the monarchy, that supposedly the monarchy has to stay above politics. And I think the criticism of the monarch as an individual may be a little bit unfair from that perspective. We may criticize the institution of monarchy, and I'm sure that there will be some considerable criticisms of that. And undoubtedly, the monarchy is a symbol of social conservatism in Britain. But nonetheless, I think that if we're talking about memory of empire, then I think we probably need to direct our thoughts and our controversies in a different direction. And I think that we need to tackle this in all sorts of ways. And I think that governments in Britain need to take this on head on, because Britain, of course, has become enormously diverse now. If you go to London now, it's an enormously diverse society. It may not be quite so much in the rest of the country, but Britain is a very changed country from when Elizabeth ascended the throne in 1952.
Sociologists watch societies and peoples far more closely than sometimes ordinary people do. So from your perspective as a professor of sociology, what is one of the things that stands out most for you about Queen Elizabeth II?
I think she survived. and she survived without having been a subject of immense controversy. And I mean, if you think about the changes which took place during her reign, which, as we've been talking about, are really quite enormous, astounding in many ways. If you think of the troubles in the royal family which have taken place, but somehow or other she managed to skirt above the controversy herself. There were the odd problems, notably around the relationship between Prince Charles and Diana. And of course, we know that Prime Minister Tony Blair had to intervene to get the Queen and the royal family to take a more sympathetic attitude towards popular feeling about the death of Diana. But apart from that, it's difficult to think of the substantial criticism of the Queen as a person. She managed to stay above the fray and to earn the respect of, I think, a wide variety of political opinion. And as people keep on saying, she earned immense international respect. I think in terms of Prince Charles, or King Charles, it's going to be difficult for him to maintain that. I think Britain is increasingly becoming a declining power. It's going to be less influential. Brexit is hugely problematic. And I think that Prince Charles or King Charles is very unlikely to earn the same affection as his mother. It's not his fault, but she's had a reign of 70 years. His reign is likely to be 10 to 15 years, and he has his own troubled background. But nonetheless, I think he will try to maintain the same values, as he said in his speech tonight, same values as his mother.
We're all going to have to get used to saying that, King Charles. But thank you very much. We do appreciate your insights. That was Professor Roger Southall, Sociology Professor at Wits University.